Now, I see it. Kerry Bracco's on. Hey, Brax.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Can you see the pictures of the people on?
I can see the pictures of the people on.
All right. Well, you know, Brent, I don't know if you have to introduce yourself, but uh, maybe
Good
you
to see you
should.
again, Dodger.
Mike, have you met Kerry? Okay, Kerry, introduce yourself for Mike Benelli. He's a hockey guy in the New York area.
Oh no, I've kept last time.
Yeah, I met with Mike last time.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm not sure. I think Jordan, we can go ahead with the introduction. I think so. People, because Brent has to leave fairly soon, so.
Okay. Well, I just want to take a minute to introduce Brent here, in that he is a former professional hockey player, a former professional rodeo cowboy. Well, actually, he's probably still a professional rodeo cowboy. He comes to us from the Tsuut'ina Nation, the neighbors Calgary. He played his minor hockey in that area, and of course through the city of Calgary, and went on to play in the WHL and professional hockey. I had the distinct pleasure of getting to meet Brent this year, as he and his wife have started a business off of their ranch in supporting us with team building. Our school, groups in team building, as well as Indigenous education. And it was there where I first got to meet Brent and hear his story. It's one of diversity and inclusion, and the importance of allyship, and all of those pieces. I since then had the opportunity to have Brent work with my AA U18 team, and to which I accredit Brent's story with helping our team come together early on in the season and understanding the importance of accepting behavior. So I think that Brent's message is an important one. He's now involved in governance in his nation, and is an extremely busy guy in helping bring on a $60+ million recreation facility, as well as many other things with their nation. So it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce Brent to the group.
Thank you, Jordan. Good morning to everybody. Hello to all my friends, and hello to my new friends. I just want to, first of all, thank you, Wally, for the invite. And I really appreciate the conversation that we had yesterday. I guess right off the bat, I just want to let you know that I have about 50 minutes. I'm very privileged to be able to host the King of Nigeria today. So I have to do a presentation in about an hour and a half. So I have 50 minutes, but what I'll do is give you a summary. My name is Brent Dodginghorse from the Tsuut'ina Nation, and we operate the DH branch diversity, and the whole mission about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it was to speak about my racial discrimination situations that I've had in hockey. This is something that I've never spoke about for about 22 years, but I finally found the courage to be able to talk about it. About 3 years ago, before the pandemic and during the pandemic, I used the time as the pandemic to have diversity summits. And what I did was invite people within the sporting community, Olympians, ex-hockey players, ex-NHLers, European, people of color, all people, all walks of life. And we started talking about one thing, was diversity. And so we come up with the presentation, and I'll give you a little glimpse of what we do. So I guess I'm from the Tsuut'ina Nation, Treaty 7 territory. There's 11 treaties in Canada, Treaty 1 through 11. But why it's so important to tell the history about where I come from is because we're the First Nation people of Canada. And long before Canada was here, the First Nation people were here. And when I talk about my presentation about diversity, I talk about the chiefs of Canada, in particular our chief, Chief Bullhead. Chief Bullhead signed a treaty in 1877. And along with that treaty, there was a lot of things that the chief signed with the government, certain issues and that are dating way back. But the one thing that I was taught by the elders is that treaty brought diversity to Canada. And diversity started with, we all know the CN, the CP rail. There was a lot of immigration and migration. So the chief or the elders really emphasized that the chiefs signed an agreement to bring immigration, and all these beautiful cultures and races start coming to Canada. And now, if you look into the present day, there's a big melting pot of beautiful cultures that are playing in sports and hockey. One of the things that we talk about was Indian residential schools, because we believe that we must tell our First Nation history on what happened in the past, and it's telling the truth of what happened to the First Nation people. And it's just an understanding 139 residential schools across Canada and what their intent was. But also First Nation people are breaking the cycle, and that we're striving and we're thriving nowadays. But it's just an overview. And I really talk about the legacy of the elders of the First Nation people, that what they went through, and in particular my granny Katie. And throughout this presentation, I really emphasize the ranch, the DH Diversity Ranch, because we talk about how the ranch has been able to touch over 700 teachers, students, athletes, and be able to teach one-on-one, not through the computer, but it's really impact diversity that's I guess face-to-face, and that was really important. We also had pitched the diversity video through the late Larry Day and Holly Fortier. So when we start talking about diversity, it was very important to talk about the lived experiences of racism. And for an athlete that's been around, I've been around for a long time, it was so hard for me to talk about my lived racism experiences on camera and explain what really happened to me. And I consider them challenges, but it was important to put them on video so people could see the impacts on how it impacts people of color, so we were able to do that in a short video, and we play it throughout our presentation. And with the thanks of TELUS and some other sponsors, we're able to show these video and these impact discrimination or racism awareness videos, because video really tells the story of what we're going through. And we all know that throughout hockey, whether it's in the AHL, East Coast, and also in the NHL, players are starting to talk about their stories. Bridget Lacquette, Ethan Bear, HDA. So it's important that these stories are told so we can teach people, teach Canadians, and teach the world about some of the discrimination that's going on, but also give them tools on toolbox kits, tools on how to recognize it and how to overcome these barriers that we stand. So my story, everybody knows that I played hockey. Everybody knows that I had a cup of tea in the NHL. I got to play 2 exhibition games. But the real most rewarding thing that I'm able to do is give back to the WHL. The WHL, I guess you can say I pretty much just forced my way onto the diversity team. I called Ron Robinson. I called Greg Gardner. I was a real advocate to say, in order to end racism, we need to be able to make people aware. We need to be able to teach people about racism. What is it? I was very persistent, so I kept I kept calling him for 6 months. So I eventually got to work with Stacy Myers, and I'm part of the WHL diversity team. But I'm very proud to be able to put policies in place. Once the policies are in place, it was important to have representation from the minority communities. And the minority communities are the ones that suffer racism and have to go through this. But it was also important for us to be able to come up with a training plan to teach people about racism and what it really is and how it really happens in sports. One of the main things is giving the important teams or the audiences, the coaches, the refs, an opportunity to learn about what is reconciliation. And everybody has their own version of reconciliation, whether it's you're a coach, whether you're a GM, whether you're it doesn't matter, anybody in the industry, but I give my version of reconciliation is building relationships. And my version of building relationships, I have to go back to the Calgary Flames and Hitman, back to the old Hitman days, Brock.
Hey,
I had to build relationships again. I had to tell them, this is what we're doing. This is how we want to do it. It took us a while, but now we built relationships. And because that relationship with our First Nation and DH Ranch, we're able to provide services, diversity work for not only the Hitmen, but the Flames, but also join partnerships with the nation. Like I said, we got a $60 million facility. It's important for nation to learn about each other and to have economic impacts and to learn about our cultures, to learn about our language, to learn about some of the things we go through. So I think it's no secret that our nation has a partnership with the Calgary Hitmen. They played their season, 19 games in the 7 Chiefs Sportsplex. Out of that, we got the Dream Gap Tour. Out of that, we got the World Juniors. Connor Bedard was here for a couple weeks. But now we have the Calgary Flames training out of our facility. So everybody has their own version of reconciliation, and it's how much work do you want to put into it? And I really emphasize that awareness and education are the main thing. It's I always have this conversation with people of color, people of diversity. You can't end racism right now, but we can look at chipping away. And that's why I'm a grassroots level. At the grassroots level, I really look at just picking away. And the more we can teach, in Calgary, we have 15,000 hockey players registered. At the Alberta level, we have around 45,000 minor hockey players registered. And that's my focus, is to really get to the youth so we can create that culture and diversity awareness so they start speaking the same language, and giving them those tools so they can correct maybe some of the older people that are using some offside language that may not be correct. So that's my whole goal, is to do it at the grassroots level, because the kids nowadays, they call them a Gen Z generation. That's how they refer to themselves, and they're so open to change and diversity. If you look at what is diversity now in hockey, you have so many beautiful cultures playing at the NHL level, and they're speaking up. Ryan Reeves, Matt Dumba, Ethan Bear, Bridget Laquette at the Canadian level. Now she's a part of the NHL with the scouting system. But you have some really key components that happened in hockey that are key. Luke Prokop was one of the first NHL hockey players to come out as a gay hockey player, and that's really key, we must teach people about the openness, what you're going to see in the sporting world, but you're also going to see it in the business community, that people are diverse and they identify, and we have to recognize that identity. You know, there's a lot of key factors, especially in Calgary. 70% of Calgarians are white and Caucasian. 30% are different minorities, whether they're Chinese, Spanish, these beautiful cultures that exist. 5% are First Nations. First Nation being Métis, Inuit, or Treaty, and many different First Nations in Calgary. So we have this huge melting pot that is in the sports industry that we're going to see, but not only the sports industry, we're going to see it in the business world. The one thing I really talk about and emphasize in my presentations is identity. Everybody has an identity that we have to be able to respect, and identity is so important. I guess it goes back to the challenges of what I went through as a hockey player. And I guess not even Brax knows about this, but it's taken me a long time to talk about my challenges. And back when I played in the BC Junior Hockey League, I'm only going to give you two examples. But back when I played hockey, I was threatened. I was called every name in the book. And when I was playing hockey in the BC Junior Hockey League, we got coincidental penalties, but there was fans that taunted me and threatened to kill me and come to the bench and threw beer on me and literally wanted to lynch me after the game. And the team tried to protect me, but they can only do so much. We even called 911 and called the cops, but they didn't do much either. So it was, you're being threatened for your life. A big group of Caucasian men that were threatening to kill me as a young hockey player, all over a game, when hockey is meant to be a sport for everyone. And at that time, I didn't get a lot of support because people were silent. And if we continue the silence, you're continuing a violent pattern in hockey. And it's unfortunate, but these are the realities that really happen to people like myself and people with different skin color. And fast forward 2 years when I played in the Calgary Hitmen, I suffered a lot of racism from a particular hockey team. And a team in the WHL was very trained on how to come at me with my race, and a lot of vulgar language would happen to me, and eventually turned into a line brawl. A line brawl eventually turned into a brawl in the stands at the Saddle Dome, 40 people fighting, but it was all over racial comments. And it was very, very, very disturbing for me. But at that time, the league did not know how to handle it in a way where they had policies. We were just forced to shake hands on it. But, fast forward 20 years ago, I would have did things different, but it was very hard for a hockey player to handle because it was all racial discrimination. And I think out of that WHL learning experiences, we need to train the refs, because they're the first people that hear the content on the ice. We also need to train the coaching staff. We also need to coach the GMs, the billets, and it needs to be. We need to be able to put measures in place to be able to teach everybody before we can even think about ending racism or making it stop, because it's not going to stop. We need to be able to educate people through lived experiences. And it was hard for me to talk about those challenges, but those are the realities that really happened to me. Even in the business side, fast forward 20 years later, when I'm building a sports facility, over a $65 million sporting facility just outside of Calgary, racial profiling still happens. And I give examples in my presentations of how it happens, but what to watch out for. it's also very important to understand that there's reverse racism. What reverse racism is when people of my culture or people of different cultures are racist towards their own cultures. And I give them examples in our presentations. And it's very important to understand that that happens. And there was a turning point. And this turning point was when Willie O'Ree was inducted to the Hall of Fame. I was asked to speak at the Willie O'Ree event in Calgary, and there was 4 Black presenters, and I was the only First Nation presenter. I was able to speak about the truths of racism that I've went through, and it's something that just happens to almost every person of color in sports. But it was a realization that a lot of people didn't understand what we were going through. And it was an opportunity to learn about Willie and what Willie's been through. We all know Willie, we all know his story. And it was so beautiful that he could carry on all through his life to educate and make people aware of the discrimination that's going on, but giving them tools to become better people. And that really motivated me. And the real turning point was my wife's a professional barrel racer. She's top 10 in Canada right now, but she suffered a lot of racism at the professional barrel racing level at the CPRA. So I give the group an example of what happened, and that was the turning point when she was going to quit her profession because of racism. But I told my wife, I said, let's use these learning examples of what happened in racism and let's make people better. Let's tell the world our story so we can make people better. And since that time, it's been our mission to teach people through diversity and awareness through our ranch at DH Ranch, but also do public speaking at the grassroots level to talk about the real truths about racism and diversity. I guess I can also talk about some of the land acknowledgements that we do and why it's important.
Brent, I'm sorry. I have a question. What you're doing really is outstanding, but the heart of it, why you're doing it. And I'm going to share a story here and ask a question after. I went to Toronto and they had hired an assistant coach that was Aboriginal, and he had coached in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and he got up to speak in front of a large group of players and coaches and managers in the association. He broke down crying while he was talking. In other words, he didn't have to speak anymore. We don't understand the pain. And I'm just going to ask you one question. Have you ever cried over that?
Yeah, Wally, since I was a kid, I was trained by my parents, my mentors, my agents, not to complain, not to say nothing, because if I'm the only kid in the Western Hockey League or the BC Junior League and I showed some weakness around diversity or racism, I was told it would make me a weaker person and they would use it against me to cut me or to not put me on the team. So I was trained not to say nothing. I was like a trained robot or with blinders on, not to say nothing. But now I think back of it, I was just suppressing my feelings and I should have spoke up. I should have said that wasn't right. But in hindsight, that's why I'm trying to make change now to make players better, because we all know every week, every month that goes by, an incident pops up in the Western League, the East Coast, at every level. And if it's happening at those levels, every day it's happening at the lower levels. Yeah, I pretty much I learned how to hide my feelings, but yeah, it was very tough sometimes. Being profiled, being different is a good thing to me. But when the majority of the hockey nation is not the same skin color as you, it can be different. So my big goal is to educate people. I've been on a mission to talk about building allies and how to be an ally and how important it is for allies to speak up. And I think it's important. We're now like 700 to 800 people that's gone through our diversity course. Through those teachings, they teach their friends and their friends talk about it. So I feel that at least we're 3,000 to 5,000 people have been affected through our program. And we're also able to teach NHL players, AHL players, and WHL players. And that's really key because we need people to be allies of diversity. And the more we speak about diversity, it's a real uncomfortable conversation for some people. It's important to understand some of the tools of diversity that are important. You have to be open-minded when you're looking into cultures or backgrounds, and identity is important. If we don't know how to talk to people of different skin colors, don't be afraid to ask in a good tone of you don't mind me asking your culture, or how do you identify yourself? And most people will say, well, I'm First Nation. I prefer if you identify me as Native American or First Nation. A lot of times in the sports industry, people will just give you a name, and it's an uncomfortable conversation that some people don't want to have, but I think we have to have it. Yeah, so there's a whole list of things that we can go through, but it's through a presentation, and but any other questions?
Anybody else got any questions on their mind? Tim Bothwell, please. Are you muted, Tim?
Yeah, I'm an old guy. Sorry. Brent, it's good to see you. We don't know each other, but I remember well watching you play with the Hitmen when I was coaching at U of C. And if anybody doesn't know, Brent was a hell of a player. He was a relentless player and a player that everybody would want to have in his team. And it does not surprise me that seems to be coming through in what you're doing right now, Brent. I wholeheartedly applaud, of course, what you're doing and support what you're doing. I was just curious about what your training program actually looks like, sort of day to day with the WHL and I assume with other leagues as well. I would hope with other leagues as well. What does the program look like? Do you do this sort of same presentation that you're sort of zipping through with us today to give us a taste? What does it look like day to day?
Yeah, in a short form to explain to you, so one of the first conversations with the WHL that we had to have was going through a whole story of what is diversity, what is racism, what is discrimination, and explain to their key stakeholders of what it is. And going through their policies was really key, walking through every single step of their policies, because as an organization, you want to be structured when it comes to policies. And that took us about 4 to 6 weeks. But on the education part, they have Stacy Meyer and myself working on I did the 2 years of research and lived experience through my whole life on diversity. But what the plan is, and we're on a handshake agreement right now, but we're looking at getting a finalized agreement, is a real walkthrough of a video content of myself narrating it, of diversity in Canada in sports, a snapshot of First Nations, the first people being here through a video forum, Treaty 1 through 11, the Chiefs, but just really getting into some of the diversity agreements that were signed as Canadians or as First Nations to allow Canadians here, and then showing the migration of cultures, and then giving them a video snapshot for the youth to show sports in general, and then getting into some of the diversity in sports when hockey first started, some of the key moments of Fred Sakamoose and Willie O'Reilly being involved into hockey, and then morphing into the present days of hockey, like present days meaning what does diversity look like right now, and really given the opportunity to have the video content to be interactive. So you do a 3 to 5 minute presentation on diversity and then stop it, and then have a moderator, which would be a virtual moderator, would be myself and somebody else, like in a sports ambassador like Bridget, or even some hockey ambassadors like Matt Dumba or Ryan Reeves, and walking through what is diversity, and then stopping the video, and then having all the players in the room have their version of diversity, and they're writing it down, and then continuing the video about just kind of segueing into what is an ally, or what is allyship, and why is it important. And this section that we're getting into, we're going to be videoing like players that are non-Aboriginal, or that are not diverse, but they're white or Caucasian. I'll give you a good example of an NHL player that speaks diversity to the T is Eric Goodbranson. He grew up in a diverse community, but he knows the importance on speaking up when you have to speak up, also to be a leader, and also having influential people in the hockey world saying why it's important, that diversity, that we must understand the issues and speaking up. Like I plan on using some of the Calgary Hitmen staff and Calgary Flames staff on what they've been doing on diversity. So it's important that the white and Caucasian people see their own people talking about diversity and why it's important. But at the end of the day, just giving them tools all throughout the video presentations on the tools of diversity. And I've got 10 tools that I use in our presentation, and we'll just put those tools of diversity. But at the end, it's the key message. I use the key message of Jerome McGinley videos, and Jerome McGinley is my, I guess it goes back to when we played together with Jerome. He corrected me when I played with him in the Kamloops Blazers. I did something wrong, and I spit on a dasher board at the Riverside Coliseum, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "You don't do that here. You get a water bottle, you clean that up." And I said, "Yes, Mr. Ginla, I'm sorry." But after the game, he pulled me aside and corrected me. And he still corrected me, and he told me the reasons why he was correcting me. And I was very amazed by his leadership. And after that, he introduced me to all his friends and made me a part of the team. So Jerome has that integrity and that leadership. So we all have that integrity and our leadership in us. We just have to be able to stand up against racism, because sports is for everyone. So we use that in our presentations to give players tools to encourage them. And it's really the hockey ambassadors, the people of color, and the ambassadors that are going to tell a story, and we just narrate it. So it plans on being, kids nowadays have a real short attention span, so you can't make the video content too long. It just has to be 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, then open conversations and end it around 35 to 40 minutes. Anything longer, they will not pay attention.
So that's terrific, Brent. I'll just follow up. I think I've told our group this story before, but it would be about 30 years ago. You'll remember Kimby Daniels played in the Western League, likely when you were younger. He probably was a role model of sorts to you. But when I was coaching in Medicine Hat in the early 90s, he got 7 goals on us one night. We were playing at home in Medicine Hat, scored 7 goals on us. And as much as that hurt me as a coach, what I was more disturbed and hurt by was the reaction of a group of fans behind the Swift Current bench. The verbal abuse he had to endure was really, really disturbing and uncomfortable. And I did go to the general manager at the time and request that we meet with the group. There were a group of maybe 20, 25 of them that regularly sat behind the bench. And, you know, they were all very nice people, all very sort of well-intentioned people, but the idea about education is so important. They didn't really understand the difference between, you know, verbally abusing somebody on a racial basis versus just basic hockey taunting of a visiting player. They didn't understand. And we did take the time to try to educate them, and I don't know how it went. We didn't have any other issues the 2 years I was there, but it just such a pervasive, such an important issue, and in so many cases, it's what people are taught when they're younger. It's what they know as people, and they just simply don't understand. And again, I really applaud your doggedness in pursuing this and having a real impact in this area.
Yeah, I guess this is a conversation I can be open about is Eric Goodbranson is a very good ally, and he calls me up and he wants to have open scrum conversations about diversity within the organizations like the Flames or the AHL, because it's important that we know when to draw the line. Chirping is a part of hockey. Chirping is a part of a mental edge that we all know that you know is key. But there's a side that's completely offside. That's racial or discrimination. That's completely offside. And he was very adamant to be able to give me insight as a NHL player. And when we talked to the Flames, that was some of our the way we went in and we talked to the Flames. It was important for Tkachuk to have that edge when he talks about chirping, but we had these open conversations about diversity, and it was so cool to be able to talk to these guys at that level. But we just emphasized that racial discrimination is completely offside and zero, and they were the ones that were telling me that. So these guys, it's like we learn more off the players in the younger generation. They could just continue to teach us. So it's important that the younger kids know that, so that culture is just created of a diverse culture. So we're talking about it. It's not silence anymore, because silence is violence, but let's educate everybody.
And are you working are you working across the board in the CHL, like with the OHL and the Q, and or you know, tier 2 level? Has your program gotten that extensive yet?
Well, currently I'm a council member for the Tsuut'ina Nation, and this will be my last term. I'm going to take my council hat off and concentrate on diversity. I'm real passionate about diversity, so we've had conversations with the CHL and also the OHL with Rico that runs their division, but I think what we're trying to do is just me at the grassroots level. I'm trying to be able to make partnerships so we can get it right. And once we hit to the CHL level, and Hockey Canada, hopefully, we got a nice program to where it's developed and we have ambassadors. So once it hits to the national level, that it's not smooth sailing, but everybody's got input, and I've just been doing the legwork for years, and I'm so passionate about it. I want it to be able to hit not only hockey, but all sports.
Brent, Kerry Bracco's had his hand up a few times. Go ahead, Kerry.
Sorry,
Hey,
Brett.
Brent. How's it going, Brent?
Hey, Brett.
How you doing? I just wanted to commend you on your efforts and the things that you're doing. I know that we go back quite a few years, and I've always watched from afar and all the things that you've done. But my one question I have is that when they talk into the trash talking and the rights and the wrongs of it, I'm starting to get to the level where I think that in youth hockey, we should, it's gotten out of control, Brent. And whether it's a little bit of the racial stuff they're trying to curb, but the overall development of young kids is really starting to be hindered because they're thinking that the trash talking is actually part of the game. And I wanted to get your viewpoints on, first of all, question number one, would you be interested in branching out into that level of age? And I'm talking specifically the Royals organization, which is right in your backyard, and I know you're a former Royal, into that area, like the U18, the U16, the U17 teams, because two things, I think trash talking has gotten out of control, and then the respect that kids could learn from people like yourself and what you've gone through, and actually get them involved in your program. Is there time to get that sort of set up? How would you go about that? I know Mr. Fenton got his team involved. I'd like to get like a whole organization involved in what you're talking about doing.
So I'm a stats guy, I'm a numbers guy, and facts. So I'll give you some facts that come from Hockey Calgary, which is Mr. Kabelka. Before the pandemic, we were at 14,500 kids in hockey. After the pandemic, we're at 13,500. So we lose 1,000 kids in minor hockey. Alberta, probably about the same numbers. But when you get into the depths of asking why are they quitting, yeah, some of it's pandemic related, but why it's quitting. We did a survey on TikTok. I know it's not the place but TikTok is a place to where we could be open. I have a friend his name is J. Roy Makokis. He's got like 250,000 followers, but when he went live and he talked about this issue on diversity in sports, and we asked, his whole group is diverse people. We asked them why they quit hockey or why they quit sports, and we did a survey. We thought 90% of it would have been financial, but it wasn't. 98% of why they quit sports or hockey was racial discrimination. And that was a real key thing for me to understand. So it goes back to what I talked about. It's education and awareness to the hockey players, to the peewee, to the, sorry, I can't say that anymore. U13, U16, and U17. It's really awareness and education, but it's coming up with a program that's able to be universal, to go to these age groups and to be able to teach them and have open conversations. So our plan is to develop it. Once we get partners, all the hockey players are willing to participate, the Dumbas, the Reeves, the Ethan Bears, the Bridget Laquettes. They're not going to listen to me. I can narrate it and help out, but it's the ambassadors and it's also the allies like Connor McDavid's, the Johnny Gaudreau's that have to talk about why it's important to be an ally and stand up and speak up. I think that's the route that we need to go. And the plan is in organizations is to train ambassadors. People, it doesn't matter what skin color you are, as long as you understand the diversity, they can be talking the same program and same language that I'm talking, and they can narrate the kids or help out organizations. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but it can get there.
You gotta mute yourself, demute yourself.
That's just my usual error. Anyway, expanding to the Royals is one thing. Getting the different leagues to do things is another. They're all very important. But Jordan, I'm glad you came on because, the trash talking, and it's Caucasian against Caucasian is ridiculous. It's borderline just teaching bad behaviors. I don't see in the playoffs trash talking going on. You might see it during the year occasionally in the NHL, but Jordan, this issue needs to be addressed in elementary school. And I think that the educational piece is what it's all about, as Brent's alluding to, and he's targeting his network of influence. So I think Gary might keep bugging you, Brent, about doing something there, and his motive isn't as much, the racial part of it, but it's the trash talking, which is.
Well, I think it's both. I think you have to, it comes. They're both the same, really.
Yeah.
Racial is just unacceptable, but the other part is equally unacceptable.
See, my point, Gary, is that there aren't many Native kids now. I don't think there's one on the Royals team.
No.
And they probably quit playing before that, as Brent alluded. In other words, whatever occurred when they were in elementary school or starting minor hockey or trying to interact in our communities, they didn't feel confident enough and they felt put down. So, Mike Benelli, New York.
Well, I was just going to comment on that, Wally.
Okay.
I was just going to comment on absolutely, it's something that needs to start in elementary schools. But one of the interesting things that we find is that the youngest ages in elementary schools will play no matter what the color or creed with one another. That racism is a learned behavior, and looking for differences is a learned behavior. So that allyship piece is so important, and I count myself very fortunate, as I said at the start, to have got to know Brent over this past calendar year, and we took all of our 50 staff from my elementary school to Brent's ranch, and that experience was an amazing one in that it's on the Tsuut'ina Nation, and so just getting that experience of, I've been down here for 14 years and never set foot on the nation, and getting to hear Brent's story, his wife's story, and other members and elders of their community stories, and that's so important in learning from others' lived experiences. And so having all of our staff go through that piece with Brent, and that was key because we are a very diverse population where my school is. And one of the other pieces with it was that allyship, the importance of stepping up. And it comes back to that old adage of, when you know better, you have to do better. And we have to do better. We know what's right. You get to the talking about trash talking and those things in the game. Yes, those were acceptable parts of the game, but they should no longer be. And there are a lot of acceptable things in the hockey culture that are still accepted that shouldn't be. that we don't accept them anywhere else. Like I use the example of I coach U18 hockey. I don't swear on the bench. I don't swear in the dressing room. I don't swear around my players. Do I know how to swear? Absolutely. I grew up on a ranch that the F word could be used as a noun, a verb, an adverb, or an adjective at any moment in time. But that doesn't mean that it's appropriate. I wouldn't accept it in a classroom in my school. So why would I accept it on the bench or in a dressing room? So that goes back to where this all has to come back to as well, is leadership. And the leadership has to be willing to take these things on. And I'm so thankful that Brent is willing to share his voice to this so that we can take this on. And as far as the Royals organization or Girls Hockey Calgary or all the different associations in Calgary, we'd be foolish not to take advantage of Brent and the Dodginghorse Ranch and that piece. Like I always just count myself lucky that to be able to have Brent come and speak to our team after we practiced in that amazing Starlight Center on the nation, and we're fortunate to be able to pair the two together. But I walked out of there and with my team hearing them a little differently about that allyship piece, most importantly. And as I've said before, that if we want to see our game grow, we have to include underrepresented populations. We have to get them to be more involved in our game. And if one of them is just this piece on diversity and allyship, well, that's a really key foundational piece. And letting people know that they're in a safe and caring environment as part of the sport. Yes, you may want to take out your physical aggressions on the ice as compete in fair competition, but we have to make sure that this sport is inclusive.
Thanks so much, Jordan. I'm going to edit out this portion for sure and include
And throw it out. Yes, I hear you.
Share it with people. Mike Benelli, you're sitting in the background in a different country, near the biggest city in the world. Okay, what's your thoughts? Questions?
Yeah, so no, I love what you're doing, Brant. I think, I got involved actually, so before maybe 4 years ago, I had no idea about any First Nations like communities, like, being here in New York City and the location in this area, obviously we work a lot with diversity, and I do a ton of work with ice hockey in Harlem and hockey in Newark and hockey in Norwalk, all these underserved, communities, and certainly diversity is always a discussion, and trying to get more kids into the game and keep them in the game, and not so much protect them, but educate, right? And I think that's a great. So in my first, actually, it's great that you're on the call, because I was actually just talking with we had done a big program up at Heisla Nation with Brian Trottier, and that's exactly what the program was. It was using hockey as an outreach tool to reach all these young kids in elementary school, and use hockey as the vehicle to then teach them and educate them about, what they're experiencing, how other people experience them, and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was great. It was actually, for me, it was a really eye-opening experience to be a part of that with him, and the work that we did with him. And we're actually doing the same thing with Reggie Leach and Bridget as well. Those type of programs where we go out and reach out to the youth players through hockey, and then hopefully you can add that educational component in there, to your point, because the celebrities, the people that have the voice, that will be listened to are front and center, and the kids can really interact with them. So I think it's great.
Brent, anything else to add or ask? And Sammy, I'm curious, you must have some thoughts rolling through your mind, but Brent, anything you want to comment on at this point?
Well, I just want to acknowledge I'm a hardcore Flames fan, live and die red with the Flames, but I want to acknowledge the Edmonton Oilers on the work that they've done. They've used allyship, building relationships with First Nations, and they've used their really their national stage to work with First Nations on land acknowledgements, using the former chief, Chief Willie, to at the beginning of every game. They've made it an impact all throughout their community. Teach people about not only First Nations, but its diversity, and you could see it in their cup run of all these beautiful cultures that they're showing throughout their interviews and throughout their people. So you have to give credit to the Edmonton Oilers because they're doing it right. All these organizations are stepping up, so it's pretty cool to see. Everybody's talking about it now, but it's important that we just continue to work together, because like big hockey guy, together everybody achieves more. It's not just me, it's not one guy, but it's how are we all going to make this sport of hockey better, and it's how we work together. And I'd just like to thank everybody for hearing me out. My website is dhranch44.com. Don't be afraid to drop us an email. Unfortunately, I have to go. We're hosting the King of Nigeria today, so he's been at our nation for 2 days. So I thank you very much.
Nobody's ever left our call saying they have to go host the King of Nigeria, so that's definitely worth it. But thank you so much, Brent. It was amazing.
We'll be in touch, Dodger.
All right, Brox, good seeing you guys. Mr. Benelli, I listened to some of your radio content. Sammy, I always watched you play hockey. Awesome. And Tim, you're an absolute legend in this area. Wally, thank you. To all the guys to hear me out, thank you. And ladies, I appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, Brent. All right. Sammy, I just wanted to get your take, because the female side in this issue, relative to what you lived and experienced over time, can you speak to the presentation and from your point of view?
For sure. So I think, amazing presentation by Brent. That was incredible. I think living in a segment of hockey that is within the minority, and my husband being a sledge hockey player, even a bigger minority within the game, it certainly resonates. But what I loved was his talk on allyship, of how the lived experiences, just because you feel like you've had a tough time in the game it's not a compare and contrast. It's having that empathy and understanding that others have very difficult lived experiences within the game as well. And growing up in Winnipeg, where it was voted the most racist city in North America, it was an interesting upbringing, where the segregation in the city is very profound, in that I wouldn't have known that growing up. I wouldn't have known that it was that racist growing up, because I grew up Caucasian in a area where we had many Métis teachers. I went to a French school, and they often taught from a Métis perspective for us. So we had a little bit different experience, I think, than a lot of my white English colleagues. But despite that, they themselves growing up had to hide their books when they learned. And they just had these various backstories that were so appalling for such a time. My dad also grew up right by a residential school in Winnipeg, and had no idea it was a residential school till he was in his 60s, because he never saw kids outside. Didn't know any of that happened. And my dad, who was in his late 70s, everything was brushed under the carpet, as we all know now in Canada. I've since done a lot of work with Right to Play, going into the First Nations communities all around Ontario and Manitoba, and it's a segment of Right to Play that's called Promoting Life Skills Amongst Aboriginal Youth, and PLAY is the acronym. So it's been about a decade, and I've been so fortunate and privileged to have been to about 15 First Nations in and around Northern Ontario and Manitoba. And so what we started to do at my hockey school was provide hockey school free of charge for anybody that can get there. So no questions asked. You don't have to submit any forms or anything. You just have to get to Winnipeg and be able to house yourself there. So we've had people from as far away as Sanakuliak, which is way up in north of Baffin Island. A ton have come from Rankin Inlet, and then also to communities that I have visited. Well, I've visited those two, but also Attawapiskat and all the communities within James Bay have come to the hockey school. And I have Bridget Lequette and her sister Tara have been instructors for a long time. They now have their own lives and their own families, and we have the next generation. And some of those kids that have come from First Nations are now instructors. But I would say it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle at the hockey school to unite the various different cultures and to create some understanding within the city is not always easy. And I try to have a diverse population of instructors and really go out of my way to try to create that. But it's hard in hockey to find role models and mentors willing to give back when, like you said, lots quit along the way. One of my favorite memories was one of the girls from Attawapiskat when she asked to be an instructor and came into my camp at Kenora to be an instructor for the next generation, which was incredible to see. But the one thing I think we struggle still with at the school, which is right in the city of Winnipeg, is the difference in expectation within cultures and the struggle that I think kids, like Jordan said, not my youngest kids, but sort of my middle kids that start to see different things and why are some allowed to do certain things and others are not allowed to do other things. I mean, sometimes kids come from First Nations and they're sharing one set of equipment amongst 3 girls. So, they might sit in the dressing room on their phone when the other kid's on the ice, and why is that kid allowed to be on the phone? And, trying to get an understanding of what it's like living on the community and really having that open dialogue. And, the one thing I wanted to ask Brent was, are we doing this the right way? What can be done more? And how do I, as a white woman, encourage that conversation within my community? So, not necessarily a question for this group, but questions for Brent and for others. And that I rely a lot on the parents that I bring to and asking questions and making sure that they know that I don't think I know everything, that I want their lived experience to be shared as well. So anyways, those are my comments. I think having somebody like Brent is so impactful and so important. I mean, we are all white on this conversation. And I think it's important for us to have the conversation, but also to listen to people like him that have those lived experiences that are not what we went through, and to really, feel the weight and the impact and the emotion, like you said, Wally, of what it's like to go through that. So thank you for letting me stand on my soapbox. I don't know that I said anything more or less, but adding to the conversation.
Excellent. Tim Bothwell?
I just want to add there, Sammy, I mean, obviously, one thing we can all do, as Brent suggested, and as Jordan, as he always does, eloquently pointed out, be good leaders in our own respective communities. I think deeply that what Brent's doing is the best way, because it does, like a lot of these really difficult political conversations, they need to include sort of tolerance and understanding of the other side, even when we deeply feel that the other side is on the wrong side. So I really get that sense from his presentation that that's front and center. He's coming at it from a let's understand each other point of view, and not I'm right, you're wrong point of view. And so as leaders, it behooves all of us to Number one, as Brent said, name it and speak out when you see it in a tolerant, understanding way, and just don't accept it. Because I really do believe sort of the one-on-one, and he's a little bit beyond one-on-one, but that's what it amounts to when you do presentations in person. It's a personal connection, and I think that is the right way, and it might be the only way to actually reach people. And so that's one thing as coaches and leaders in our own respective communities that we can all do, is to have it front and center, that it's not acceptable, the racist, whether it's comments or whatever it is.
The one thing that I'm not sure if it was Bridget and Tara indicated to me, but I used to say that if you live in a First Nation community, you can come to the school for free. And someone said to me, that isn't the right language to use. You're putting one above the other, implying certain things about certain communities. And so now the way that I word it is anybody, you don't have to live in a community, anybody can pay whatever they like. And so whatever you feel like your family can afford, and then, most people do pay something, whether it's $50 or something, but still no questions asked. So whatever you feel like your family and that child can afford, then they can come and participate. So I think just changing some of that language too, for me, I think I'm doing something really great, but the reality is that is from a racist bias lens that I have. So understanding our own biases sometimes too is hard terms to come to terms with.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Sammy. Applaud you for that. I just sent everybody but Brack. I realized I don't have your email, but I just sent everybody.
You don't have my email.
Yeah, I don't have your email. It probably must be
all those years of fundraising. Holy smokes!
No, I just sent everybody an article from Saturday's Globe that really struck me, and it was on this topic. It's called. It was at the bottom of the opinion section. It's called "Am I Métis Enough?"
Mm.
And it's a terrific article. I think really well balanced and presented. This woman speaking about her great grandmother's inspirational actions that spurred Louis Riel to start the rebellion in 1870. It's quite a good article, worth a read on this topic, and so I just thought I'd point that out to everybody. So Brack, what's your email?
Carrie@brackobrothers.com.
Okay.
I'd love to see that. It's interesting. It's with great pride that, listening to Brent, because, it was roughly about 30 years ago that I had the privilege of kind of recruiting him to come back to Calgary to play for the Hitmen. I was the general manager of the Hitmen at the time, and I had heard through a friend, Mario Amatillo, actually, what a quality kid he was, and that he'd had kind of a rough time at age 16, 17, and 18. And he was a slender kid, and he'd had some of the situations that happened out at and when he played in Vernon. And I found him. He was actually down in the United States trying a tier 2 level down there, and talked him into coming back. And it's been such a privilege, because he came in and he really, what the reason he came back was, he said, all I want is an opportunity, and a proper opportunity. And we were in a situation, and we provided that, and he played 2 great years with the Hitmen. I was there in the situation with some of the taunting that went on with the racial stuff, and it wasn't good by any means, and very unacceptable. And I think the guys that were on his team, they stood up, but it just wasn't right. And so I applaud what Brent's done. I've watched him become a counselor, and he talks the talk. Like, he is out there doing a lot of this sort of stuff. So I think the more that the diversity can get out there, obviously through whatever realms, and there's the discriminative part of it, but I also think that that could be how you treat people in general, whether you're an athlete or not. And which leads me to my next little segment. How is everybody finding the trash talking going on in their different realms? Because I just think it's gotten out of control.
Gary, I witnessed it and watch it on a daily basis, and it's just acceptable. That's what happens. We think it's acceptable, and that comes from leadership. In minor hockey, at your level, the AAA level, and any league, when that goes on, it's something that leaders have to address. And the number one leader is the coach. But what does the association represent? So it's, that's another part of the game, which is primarily a Caucasian game. And I wanted to just not get away from, I wanted to sort of talk a bit about Brent and the conversation I had with him yesterday. Just trying to reconnect with him. I really believe that the Aboriginal culture has so much to offer. Let's face it, I emigrated here. All of your relatives came here from a different country, and we're living in their land. And the Aboriginal people have a respect for Mother Earth more than we do. And I just think that sports is a vehicle to do good. My parents emigrated from the Ukraine, and you know what the hell's happening over there now. It's a consequence of a lack of leadership or misdirected leadership. So the stories I've exchanged with Brent, working with the Aboriginal girls team and learning about their culture at the Aboriginal national camps created by the Aboriginal Sports Circle, acting as a leader with Hockey Canada, scouting players, inviting 25 of the best female athletes and 25 of the best male Aboriginal athletes to camps. Ted Nolan coached the male team. I ran the camp with the female side, and what I learned at those camps was priceless. Every morning, a prayer circle. Now, not all the players came all the time. The girls did when I was at the camps. I made it something to be responsible for. Elders were the sports psychologists. And there were issues that they were dealing with because they weren't assimilated. And now they were in an extremely white cultural environment away from their comfort zone and unfamiliar with the customs of our hockey world. So I got to live it and witness it. But the thing I appreciated the most is the culture and how we've forgotten about looking after the world we live in. And the connection with nature was amazing. Sammy, you'll find this just deeply meaningful but humorous. In one of our prayer circle meetings in Ottawa at the U of W campus, can you imagine gathering in a circle on pavement with one little tree someplace and being smudged, the elders saying a few words, and in the middle of this, a rabbit hops out to the center of the circle. This was the first day. I looked at the Aboriginal female coach next to me and just glanced at her. Well, the second day, a raccoon came out. I thought, okay, where's the cage? Anyway, nothing the third day, but on the fourth day, 3 birds hovered in the center and the apex of that circle. And in stories talking to the elders, their connection with nature and animals is real. And I've had stories shared with me that are unbelievable. But after seeing that, I fully appreciate that. And it gives a deeper meaning to the value of any culture, but particularly the Aboriginal culture. So the last thing I want to comment on in teaching at my high school, from an assimilation point of view and a cultural appreciation point of view, many schools in my jurisdiction, but our school in particular, we'd have cultural evenings where the children and the parents of children from different nations, myself included, brought their food, put up displays, and we got to eat meals that you can't imagine just by walking around, and developed an appreciation for one another. And it's all the same. We're trying to connect. It's it's not just the Aboriginal people today. We've really allowed a lot of immigrants, and there's more Ukrainians coming in again. And I remember I'm a first-generation Canadian, and I appreciate this country more than anybody. So I'm not sure if anybody's got anything else to ask or add, or wants to talk playoffs, or.
I just wanted to add, Wally. I was just typing in the chat. If you guys aren't aware, another great read on this topic in this area is Bernie Saunders' book, "The Game That Didn't Love Me Black." His brother John Saunders is a longtime legend at ESPN, sportscaster, and it's a terrific read. Bernie was a hell of a player, all-time leading scorer at Western Michigan U. Played a couple of seasons with the Quebec Nordiques before quitting the game, basically because of the racial abuse he suffered, which was a real tragedy. He's an exceptional player, and it's a really, really terrific read for anybody interested in another dive inside this topic. I read it a couple of months ago, just after it was released. Really excellent. So it's called "The Game That Didn't Love Me Black." Really interesting story, easy read, well written, and pretty sad story in the end, I guess, but a happy ending. Like, he's very happy and has a terrific family. He's done really well in the business world, but really sad that, because he was a really fast, skilled, big, strong, powerful player, and just couldn't find a place in the game, quite unfortunately, because of this stuff. So hockey's lost for sure.
Tim, I'm just trying to get back to the Aboriginal side of things. On my first ever camp in Thunder Bay, dealing with Aboriginal athletes, elders, and the environment. The Twin Arena, on one side, the boys practice, the other side, the girls practice. And it was the first day and lunchtime. And between the arenas is a big food service area. It's packed. And I'm sitting with Teddy Nolan and our other staff members. And all of a sudden, after about 20 minutes, the room is empty. And I didn't notice it until about 30 minutes after. And we went and looked on the ice. The boys and the girls were on the ice with their shorts playing the game. That tells you something about why they play the game. They love it. And they play it in a way that we don't. We work it. and they were out there playing. And I really believe that some of what they bring and do, we maybe have pushed back a little bit on by structure, but the creativity that they have and the individual skills that they have, the players that we've talked about that you all know growing up, they were phenomenal players. So there's something to be learned, not only from their culture and society, but from the playing of the game. So that's my my last story here, and I don't know. Tom Malloy, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one girl, Aboriginal girl, and from Aklavik, and there was no real hockey there. They had outdoor rink that she would just stick handle by herself and stuff, and she was an amazing skater, stick handler. And then she loved hockey so much that her mother, they moved down south, not very far south, but somewhere that had a rink, and she played in a deal where they just took, there was two groups and they take turns, maybe 2 minutes on the ice each, and the buzzer go and the other, the older kids would go on, but it was shinny. So later she went to Notre Dame in Wilcox, and it wasn't until grade 10 she learned what an offside was. And so anyway, she was playing for me, but she basically taught herself how to play, and had it was 1-on-5 hockey totally, just absolutely 1-on-5 hockey, but you couldn't see any why she wouldn't, because that's how she learned, right? But she was really, really good. But going on to what Wally said, she did love to play. And if she would, the game has got a structure that she never did get onto, but I just want to share that story of how she loved it so much she ended up in playing there and playing college hockey.
Thanks for that story, Tom. That's a good reminder. So, Jordan, are you still on?
Yeah, looks like he is. He's muted. He might have had to step away, as he often does, because he actually works,
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the.
I guess Brack and Mike do too, and Sammy. Some of us are actually working people.
Yeah.
Well, Brax, I don't know how you do it,
Generating taxes, Tim, eh?
Yeah.
but if you ever go by the
You
oak
keep
shop,
generating those taxes. I'll keep taking them.
Brax is always talking hockey.
Oh.
Are you in your office now, Kerry?
Oh, you're muted, Brack, and he is. I recognize it. I think that.
Yeah, I'm in my office right now. Yeah.
But Kerry's office is a shrine of all of his coaching experiences with pictures, and anytime you go in there, an hour is sort of a minimum time that you're going to spend talking hockey, and he'll pull out articles and stuff he's put together for the good of the game and about coaching. And I know right now the issue of trash talking is a real serious moral issue. Why are they playing the game that way? Why are they doing it? What are we teaching them in terms of the values that sport should teach? And I agree with it, Kerry, and I hope we can get.
I was going to say that, one of the ways that, as a coach, you do have the leverage and the power to, because a lot of coaches don't feel they should do it because it, whatever. But I just do zero tolerance on trash talking. If you got time to talk to the opposition, you're not working hard enough in my mind. So, I know there's going to be bits and pieces of it, but and from what I gather, Sammy Joe, I mean, the ladies have really gotten vicious, and is that correct from what you've seen?
Sammy?
I just think more and more women are playing. And so I think women have always been on par in their cultural communities with the men in the community. So yes, there are very progressive women that are not like that, just like there are men, and there are women that are the other end of the spectrum. So I think to blanket all women with that is perhaps a little bit of a misnomer, but yes, it exists as much in women's hockey. We can't say we're immune to it.
Well, it's something that needs to kind of be addressed as time goes along, some way, somehow, because, you know, the numbers are dwindling in hockey overall, and there's a lot of reasons why. But
well, and I found it interesting when he talked to the NHL guys about how racism is not acceptable for trash talking. So then I thought, well, what are they trashing each other about? And likely it has to do with women. But so that becomes acceptable, but trash talking about racism does not. So yeah, there is, I think I agree with everybody on this call that it has no place in the game at all. I mean, it shouldn't even be allowed to be part of it. And it was interesting, his perspective, that, you know, he thought it was a mental edge that some players were attempting to get. And but like Jordan said, if it's not acceptable in a classroom, it should not be acceptable by any coach worth a grain of salt within their team either. That's just my opinion.
Well, you know, I think we can use Mr. Tkachuk as a good example. If he probably closed his mouth and didn't be such a disturber, he becomes a top 10 scorer, and he also becomes a very rich man. And I'm sure that Mr. Sutter had that conversation with him, you know, because at the end of the day, his skill set is off the charts. And that's what people really want to come and watch. To sit there and, you know, trash talk to the point where it takes your energy away from being the athlete you could be. You know, he came leaps and bounds. He's a 100-point man from the previous year, where he spent way too much energy, in my mind, involved in, you know, being that type of player, right? I think, you know, kudos to whoever got to him. But I always said if the Flames were going to do well, they were going to have to get him to understand they need his offensive skill ability. They don't need his I guess, what do they call it now? Disturbing, or you know, getting under everyone's skin. Or I wasn't a big Ken Linsman fan, and I just don't like that entity of it. I mean, and Tim, and you would have been around, Tim, you know, with a lot of that, you know, and it's always been there. Will it ever leave?
Well, we certainly hope so, Brack. And kind of interestingly, you mentioned Ken Linsman, who is obviously a terrific player, but a real shit disturber on the ice, for lack of a better way of saying it. And he actually, when I was growing up in Burlington, Ontario, there's a big tournament there every year. Ken Linsman billeted with our family in Burlington.
Oh, really?
My mom loved him to death. He was such a polite, intelligent. Really, he became quite an art collector, I understand, but a polite, intelligent young man, but took on a different persona on the ice. And I was going to add to your comment, like in a bit different area, but a similar area on emotional control. It's my observation and real belief that Sidney Crosby made quite a transformation when Mike Sullivan came on board, that allowed them to win the subsequent cups that they did. From one playoff to the next, like he was, you know, and in some ways, in Sid's defense, justifiably, he was a real whiner, complainer, yapper to the referees about, you know, the lack of calls against them. I really believe, and I'd love to know someday, and I'll maybe meet Mike someday, but they surely must have had a bunch of conversations, because from one year to the next, Sid's emotional control went from 2 or 3 on the scale to 8 or 10 on the scale, where he just played hockey and focused on hockey, and he was a force. and they won a couple of cups, I think largely, or certainly a large part because of it. So it's that emotional control aspect of being a great athlete. There's a fine line to walk, as we all know, whether it's in your preparation, getting too excited versus too relaxed. There's an excitement level in between that's sort of perfect, the ideal emotional state, and it carries on to the on ice stuff. And whether it's the verbal abuse or the emotional control of yourself, really, really important part of being a great athlete and being the best you can be, and really important for all of us as coaches to recognize that element and how it is important in terms of our players being the best they can be. So just kind of interesting thing.
And it is possible as a coach to gain that. I know on the teams that we've had the most success with, we're more focused in on playing the game and not discussing life with the referees, or the kids will do it. If you show that sort of I call it the no tolerance end of it, but you have to give them a reason why. And I just, one of the best compliments I ever got was from a guy at an Air Canada Cup. He said, "Your team's silent." It was a referee chief. He said, "We don't hear a word from them on the ice at all." And he wondered what the deal was. And I said, we weren't a good enough skilled team to not focus in on being a good team. And that was one of the things that we pushed for, was literally zero tolerance with officials and the opposition. And I just used a simple phrase: if you got time to talk, you're not working hard enough. And, and a lot of it goes back on because I was involved in trash talking an awful lot. And I think if I had to do
I can't imagine, Brack.
Huh? Yeah. If I had to do it all over again, I would have never said another word. I would have just been aggressive, because trash talking doesn't, being aggressive and being, I guess, you guys see me play, so, they don't go hand in hand. But, there is a lot of trash talking that goes on. But if I had to do it all over again, I would have just been physical and just looked and laughed and skated back to the bench.
And
Probably would have saved me a couple 100 minutes a year too.
I'll reinforce Jordan's point too, that totally agree with all those comments, Brack. And again, it's really important that the coaches walk the walk. If you want your players to be silent, like Brack's team was, then as a coach, you got to walk that walk. And all of us, and I'll include myself, we struggle with that at times. But it's really, really important. And the offshoot of that would, of course, be we'd have more, in terms of numbers, we'd have more, and we'd have better people taking on the role of being referees if we all learn to be a little bit more tolerant and respectful of the difficult jobs that they have in policing the game. It's just, that's almost the ugliest part of minor hockey. Let's not talk about the verbal abuse on the ice. Let's talk about the verbal abuse coming from the stands and the parents, who are supposed to be the leaders, directed at the referees. It's really, really sad. And hopefully, I mean, Hockey Canada has taken some swings at this in the past, and it seems like it's a ebb and flow kind of thing, and people get tired of making the effort, but we all have to be vigilant and be persistent if we're going to make a dent and sort of the role that relentlessness that Brent seems to have. He's got a passion for what he's doing, and you can tell he's going to stick with that for a long time.
Tim, I put a video together of Ron back in that era, going back on the ice, and I attached it. And when he probably caused a goal, took a penalty, and really blew up on the ice. And then they interviewed him after the game and he tried to justify it. But I sent the link out for everybody because what you're saying is, yeah, that's fundamental sports psychology, emotional control, stay in the zone, know what your objective is, and carry your story and the success of your coaching as proof of the pudding. And it seems like we're going to go to our graves with nothing being accomplished by about it by leadership, starting at the top right down to the coach. It's his responsibility to control that and to be in control of that and draw the line of what's acceptable and hold people accountable. So who knows what's going to come of it down the road.
Well, I have
That is
something that
tough.
I would add to that, Wally, to what both Carrie and Tim were saying. I'm in my car heading towards a meeting in Airdrie now, but the trash talking thing. One of the things that I've been thinking about when you've been bringing that up, Carrie, was here we have a generation of keyboard warriors, I call it, that are so busy they will send disparaging comments towards almost anything from their phone, the keyboard on their phone, yet they won't say them in person. Yet here we are in sport, they're at least finally saying it to somebody in person. So that's an interesting thing to me. But the other piece to it is, as you've said, that the emotion, players will match the emotion of their coaches. And Wally, to your question of do we see it in right now? And I see it, yes, in our league, but the league or the teams that are most guilty of it wouldn't be surprising in that the emotional control of the coach on the bench is a precursor to it. That and right down to the grinding on officials. And probably like you, Carrie, I was one of those people that wore out my welcome on officials' ears from time to time, more than my fair share. But as a coach, I don't, and because their decision on the ice is their decision, and it's over and done. Sometimes I'll ask for clarification at the end of a period, and I'll share a story with when I was at the Alberta Challenge as a mentor. Our team had received a few penalties in succession, and so I thought, good learning opportunity for this head coach I was working with. I said, you may want to ask the referee over and just ask for their explanation so that you can help your players. And I said, approach it that way. And I said, sometimes it tips the scale again. They become aware that that yes, most of the penalties have gone one way. Well, so this coach, she calls calls the official over, and this young female official, it was almost like she had PTSD. Before the coach could get something out, she already had her back up and was ready to argue and fight. And the coach, fortunately, kept a calm demeanor and realized right off the bat that this was going to go nowhere fast. And she just thanked her for coming over and sent her away. But it was one of those things that now with the officials, because they are receiving it from all different areas, that it's probably even more difficult now to have those conversations in a calm way because they're expecting the other so much.
Well, I do know one thing. Having been at the national championships a few times, and I don't know what your experience has been, Tim, but like in our area, our referees are different, and they tend not to manage the games very well. And Wally, when we were out at the TELUS Cup, I thought the referees did an outstanding job. But the majority of those referees were from outside of our area. So sometimes you get so familiar with your local referees that maybe you don't give them the benefit of the doubt that you would for people outside. Because, but I've also found, they probably call twice as many penalties in our area which actually becomes a development issue with getting kids on the ice. And my pet peeve has always been is that, you know, we're not doing as good a job of developing good young referees because who's ever managing them is not helping them manage the games the way it's being done, you know, in the rest of Canada per se. And so we do, you know, and it might be specific to the way I see it in our area, but we do have challenges and it's not easy to overcome. Because nobody seems to want to listen, eh, Tim?
Carrie, the officiating is the biggest distraction for coaches. And I think at different times, every one of us has been guilty at reacting to the referee's call versus taking that as a learning experience. He might have made a mistake like you and I have made many on the bench. And being able to take the referee out of the game and realize he's there for the safety of both teams and the outcome of both teams. He is not biased in trying to swing things. He's just doing his best job, and depending on their experience. And that's why at the TELUS Cup, probably the best referees that you can find. So in any league that you coach in now in minor hockey leagues, keep in mind the referees are developing too, and they're learning too. And how you are in charge of their development as much as the referees association or observers who meet with them often between periods. And I've watched at AAA double A games, sat with referee mentors who go down between periods. They're taking copious notes. Well, nobody's watching the coaches and taking copious notes and going down between periods. So they do
That's a good point.
They make a better attempt at doing a good job than we do. So coaches have to become mentors and be able to handle the referees and accept them. And as a coach, you can manipulate some. You can play mind games with them, and just by being quiet and not saying anything or just smiling at them, it might be a bad call. But coaching and with referees is an art. So Tim Bothwell.
You got to demute yourself, Tim.
Thanks, Brack. Yeah, just adding to that, Wally, not only do coaches need to become better mentors, coaches need to accept mentorship better and be open to learning and progressing and getting better as a coach. As we all know, so many young coaches, and I was one, I fully admit, fall victim to the I know what I'm doing, I know it all kind of mentality, and they're not open to constructive feedback, and we expect that from our players to openly accept feedback, and hopefully they don't take it personally. But so coaches as a group, they need to be more accepting of finding a mentor, and B, being open to learning from that mentor. And I heard a really interesting thing on CBC yesterday. The fella who is the chaplain for the Toronto Raptors and the I can't remember whether there's the Argos, I think the Blue Jays, I'm not sure, but really interesting guy to listen to. But one of his little anagrams that he uses, and I think he credited his wife with it, was Q-tip. Quit taking it personally. And it sort of echoed in my ear right away when I heard him say that. Peter Smith's been on a number of times and does a terrific job building relationships with his players. And one of the things he likes to really encourage and talk a lot about with his players is when there's feedback coming your way, try to get out of the positive, negative mindset and try to put your mind in the place where, is the feedback useful or is it helpful, instead of, is the coach saying something positive or is the coach saying something negative? So it's the Q-tip thing. Quit taking it personally and just listen to the feedback and try to determine whether it's useful or helpful. And all coaches would benefit from that. And last thing, I guess, I'll try to dig up, there's a terrific, I think, TED Talk by a surgeon, a world-class surgeon, who talks about how he thought he knew it all as a surgeon, and at one point he got involved with a mentor and realized, wow, I don't know it all. I can learn something from this guy or this person. I'm not sure is a man or a woman. So there's a guy who's a world-class surgeon all over the world and thought he knew it all, but realized, no, that's not the case. We can all be sharks and keep moving forward. But I'll try to find that link again. I know I sent it to you guys before, but I'll resend it.
Mike Benelli, I'm just going to reach out to you again and get see what your take is on everything we're saying and applying it to your environment.
Yeah, no, you had great guests, and Brent was great. I think, like I said, I've done so much work with Brian Trottier now and his relationships up there that all on the same page, really, using hockey as just this great outreach. And I think, Tim, to your point on the coaches, I mean, this is like, so I'm doing this thing with the coaches site out in Ann Arbor 2 weeks from now. And, we offered, I've been offering these mentorship type environments for our young coaches in our organization. And I even got the organization to pay full boat, the conference, the flight, the hotel, stipend, 3 days, to be around really great coaches and mentors, and not one taker. I couldn't believe it. I was like, just the lack of,
Are you serious?
Wow.
And they'll be at a Nashville tournament next weekend with their 8U team in 2 seconds. So it's just, to me, I think there is a lack of, and this is where I think Europe gets it right, and I think Scandinavia gets it right, is that there's such a lack of, it's not even respect, but respect for the coaching profession and instructing, and how it is just as much is needed to go into our coaches as we do for our teachers. And I think they do have that in Europe, and that model is I think it's a better model for those that really want to dig in and learn about the coaching profession. But I think half of it is just people needing to want it, right? You have to want to be mentored and want to have the opportunity to learn. And maybe it's just circumstance because of the people I've always been around, but I've been really lucky to run into great coaches.
Would you offer that to somebody up north?
Well, it's not my money. It's the money, it's the money from the organization. I'm just a big continuing education guy. I'm
Good for you.
You could just get out here and do these 3 days. It's pretty cheap, and what an opportunity to be immersed in the hockey world with all these great hockey people live. It's so much different learning in a collaborative environment than it is on Zoom. And most of these newer coaches haven't been to a live, face to face, getting your hands dirty conference in 3 years now, or at all, or ever. So it's to me, it's that kind of stuff that I really think we need to do a better job of. And if we can get our coaches to start doing more of that, then maybe it does filter down and it does start resonating throughout the rest of the coaching ranks. But disappointing, but I understand it. So Raleigh, from my side, it's still a struggle, but it's I guess again, if you can get one or two, I got a couple of kids, right? I call them kids, young men that I'm working with now that have been really receptive to having these very, very similar calls like this, and once a week, and just a half hour of just getting like I'll take like Tim's stuff and I'll just send it out to them as my own, and be like, look at this thing we found. This is great. Use it. And I think they love it, and I think it's a great opportunity for them to be like, well, who has because when you're in groups like this, who has time to find all this information? Groups like this bring all that information to one place. So I think it's really, really valuable. So yeah, we'll continue to talk, Wally. Like I said, I thought Brent's stuff was great, but obviously we're all
Harry,
Yeah.
I've got a proposal. Just based on what Mike said, these Zoom calls are learning experiences. Brent spoke, he was the guest. I interjected. It led to questioning, different people speaking and expressing their thoughts. That's what head coaches need to do. And if the assistants wanted to join in with the Royals, it's something worth attempting. And understanding the principle of being a shark as a coach. And the story of that, of course, is moving forward, breathing, swimming, and breathing and learning. And that's all we do here. Everybody's got their opinion, everybody's got their experiences. And so if they join such a call, it would be a case of drawing out from each of them and the sharing of information. And that relationship as a group of coaches is worth contemplating.
Yeah, no, definitely. Everybody should be always open to learn. I'm always open to learn every second of the day. I mean, there's just so much to learn, and there's so much information out there, and especially from the coach's perspective. Michael, I got a question for you. Maybe this is a talk for a different time, but so you're down in the New York area, and how are you finding the overall games? Like up here, we're really caught with lots of opportunities. And like, do you have one minor hockey system, or do you have the sports schools happening, or like, how did you decide who goes to what program? Has it become very like lots of options, or is there still pretty minimal?
Yeah, no, it's the Wild West down here. I mean, you have it could be as simple as a coach leaves and he takes 15 kids with him to another organization instantly. To
Wow.
To who can build a better marketing tool, really. I mean, so we have the programs I mostly work with individually myself are I break them to two silos. I have the developers and the compilers, right? And the developers are these small organizations that build talent. They find kids. They make it fun. It's low cost. It gets kids in the door. It builds the bottom of the pyramid and the funnel. And then you got the compilers, which then go out and say, okay, well, the best two kids from this org, the best two kids from that organization, and we're going to take them and put them on a team. Not unlike most places, but the player movement and the freedom that people have is almost too much. I'm a big believer that the parent and the player should go where they want to go. But when it really starts to, you could see an organization crumble within months in certain age groups. I've seen organizations that I've worked, that I haven't worked with, but I've tried to work with to help them, that could lose a 12U team and in 3 months have no 12U, no 11U, and no 10U because all the dominoes fall. And
Wow.
And then they're always starting from scratch. So it is it's the only thing holding back players from moving is financial. Like you say, okay, well, I paid my bill and I can go anywhere I want. And so except for places like Minnesota and stuff where it's more regional, and that's even starting to get there's really starting to get a lot of chinks in the armor right now. We have on the East Coast here, we have a whole separate group leaving USA Hockey and just doing their own thing because there's enough teams and enough rinks that they own that they can do their own programming. They don't need the governing body to oversee them. They're their own governing body. So it'll be an interesting experiment over the next couple of years when you have, rink owners that can just run their own teams and play within their own groups. They don't need outside groups. So it'll be an interesting experiment to see how much it affects retention, growth, and I think
one of the reasons I brought this up was
up and up.
It's creating, I just on my son's program, 4 of the best players just up and left. And in Canada, we haven't had it to this degree, and but it's, I guess, like you said, too many opportunities sometimes can cause even more problems. But
and where
trying
I
to
am,
get a consistent
within
growth
an hour
model.
that in an hour of me, which is kind of, you wouldn't think about it, but within an hour of my location, there's 60 rinks. So for me, for a family to say, well, I don't mind traveling 45 minutes to go to this rink because there's no, it's a AAA top tier, there's just no regulations about how you tier kids or what you call yourself or, how you could have, it's the Wild West. It's just whoever can market the best and then bring a coach in to bring those 15 kids in. And then hopefully you retain that guy or girl and that coach. And then maybe you can keep them for a couple of years, but it's not sustainable from an organizational point of view. It may be sustainable from a team point of view, like individual groups of kids, but not when you're trying to run an organization.
Well, and what's interesting when you say that is that, one of the fringe benefits of being in Canada for all these years is it was pretty organized in a very simplistic fashion. And now it's gone the other way, what you're talking about, and we're just at the beginning of it. And it's started to cause lots and lots of challenges. And
well, it's in every sport. We run our lacrosse program here, and because down south, like Maryland and these other places, started running lacrosse tournaments for the club teams, for the travel programs earlier and earlier and earlier because they want to make more money. The rec programs start getting squeezed out because now the rec programs end.
Yeah,
our rec program will end in this weekend, and we still have 3 more weeks of school left. Where the kids, if you're not on the travel team, you're not playing at lacrosse anymore for the whole spring, which is the craziest. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, that we're catering to the 5% and not to the 95% of kids, and that's where it comes down to. Are we providing access? Are we providing, opportunity? And are we providing a place for children to go and enjoy?
Well, and we always talk about, creating a good experience. And I think part and parcel, when you start taking the best athlete out of his peer group, you start telling him he's better than his buddies. And really, sport was put together initially to have a good experience playing on a team and growing with your buddies and stuff.
I have the conversation. It's the same conversation every day. I should just put it on just a tape delay or something, because it's like, well, I want my kid's the best kid, so I want him to play up with a different group. I go, yeah, but then that other group, when his peer group gets to him, then when does it end? Like, when do we ever build the program? We never can build the program because then you're going to leave my program anyway. If the program that you are trying to avoid keeps coming up with you, eventually you're going to leave. So why am I catering to you anyway? I don't need to cater to you. I need to cater to the group of kids that are going to be with us for the long haul, because they're not looking to leave.
And so you're basically there right now, battling what we're going to begin to really battle.
Yeah, it's the same question every day. Well, my 3 kids that played on the A team, like I right now, like most of the organizations that I'm directly involved in, we kind of restructure them to be major minor programs. So you have specific age groups that are working. In the US, it's really not set up that way. In the US, it's really set up as AB or AAA and AA, and like, so you have first year 10U players that are really, really good playing with second year 10U players. So what happens is when all the 9U players come up, when the new kids come up, they're not good enough, and they're not battle tested like the other group. So then another group leaves anyway, thinking, oh, well, now we're going to keep them, have better players. Like, well, we don't want to play with those shitty kids. They're no good. So they want to leave and go to another pro. So it's a vicious cycle, and it happens. When I do these, I do things called like an intake call, like with the organizations, and every call is basically the same. But that's great being on these calls because they give me the opportunity to present a perspective of all these great, people really from around the world, right? Having the opportunity to discuss what their issues are.
Well, that's interesting to find out.
Yeah, and now I will give one plug for Thomas Pacina. He was on Greg's. I don't know did you guys cover that last week? He was on Greg's podcast, that Hockey IQ podcast, and it was really, really good. You guys, if I find it, I'll throw it in there. But I thought Thomas did a great job of articulating what he's done from his development standpoint. But it was a really good interview, and I thought he did a great job. A lot of Wally Kozak plugs in there as well, and talking about the Sharks. So it was good. I thought they did a great job of talking about that change in culture and teaching kids to feel their development. So it was good.
I think I got to go back to work. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's
me
been
too.
outstanding.
I think we all do.
That was great.
I'm picking you up tomorrow, right, at 11?
Yeah, I'll text you tomorrow, and then thanks for helping me out there.
If you could text me the numbered address,
Sure.
and I'll put it in the GPS. I'll look forward to seeing you. And everybody that stayed on this long, 2 hours, 1 minute, 24 seconds. Well done.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Okay. Hope to hear you and see you all next week. Take care.
Good to see you, Brack. I expect I'll see you at the golf tournament in a couple of weeks.
I believe I'm almost signed up. There's you guys chomping at me, so I'm sure I'll be there.
Yeah, me and Kabelka and I are planning to play. I'm trying to drag a few other bodies out, but I tried to get Pegger and Drew Shinnick to get out, but they've both got commitments.
Where is Pegger now?
He's still in southern Saskatchewan.